Hey everybody, Todd Smith here of the North Georgia Revival and Christ Fellowship Church in Dawsonville, Georgia. I just wanted to jump on here today for about the next 25 to 30 minutes and have a honest conversation with a dear friend of mine that many of you know, but those of you that don't know him, you're going to get to know him over the next 25 to 30 minutes. I really feel that this is a strategic moment for us right here at Christ Fellowship and the North Georgia Revival and literally the body of Christ. I'm going to introduce to you John Barge. John Barge is a covenant partner here at Christ Fellowship Church. He is the husband of Lorraine Barge. As many of you know, she was the one that was healed of cancer, over 50 cancerous lesions in her body. Entered the baptismal waters, and the Lord literally healed her at that moment, and all cancer is gone. And that's been over 2 years. Well, the reason John Barge is here with us today, he is running for office of the state school superintendent of the state of Georgia. And I wanted him to come on and share his thoughts, his views, his ideas, his platform. And many of you are thinking, well, Todd, I don't want you, I don't think it's necessary for you to be involved in the political arena and to promote a political ideology. Well, let me just address that right here very quickly. I believe that we are in such a difficult situation in our nation. Our country is facing some, seems to be insurmountable obstacles. Our society is literally deteriorating right before our very eyes. And so I feel very strong that we need to talk about these tough issues and be able to put the right people in office. And by no means am I going to be telling you who to vote for, but I wanted to share the influence of Christ Fellowship, North Georgia Revival, to allow someone to come on and talk about why we need to take back the public education and make it really godly and Christian the best that we possibly can. So, John, with that statement, I want to welcome you to our platform today. And we're just going to be talking to literally hundreds and literally thousands of people around the world. And I want them to get to know you because you're going to be, you're a candidate right now, jumped into the campaign of being the highest ranking principal in the state of Georgia. And I just want to welcome you. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Well, there's so much that we want to talk about that I find so compelling. There's a lot of things that's going on in our public school system. We have to have godly teachers, Christian teachers. We got to have godly leaders, Christian leaders in the public school system. And I think we need a change. We do. So let's talk about the public education system right now. And why are you running? Why are you running for the state school superintendent in the state of Georgia?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you so much. So I'm a lifelong educator. I just retired 2 years ago after a 30-year career in public education in Georgia. So, I believe in public education. I experienced the power of public education, or really education. I personally experienced the power of education to level the playing field. I grew up in a poor home with an alcoholic dad, and, I took advantage of what was provided to me at school. I knew that if I wanted to break out of generational cycles of poverty and alcohol abuse and all of those things that go along with that, then it was up to me. And the only way that I knew to do that was to get an education and to go to college and to have a career. And so I did. I did well in school, and I earned scholarships to college, and my life changed. And not just my life, but the generations that come after me. We broke those generational cycles of poverty through having a really strong education. So, I value education. And the last 5 years, I was a local superintendent, and I've seen so many things. Things have really accelerated socially and culturally in our country. And I saw things that came down the pike as a local superintendent back in 2016. I was superintendent, and we received what we now call the Dear Colleague letter that came out of the Office of Civil Rights when Obama was president. And that letter told us as superintendents that we had to allow children to use whatever bathroom of whatever gender they identified with. And you know, we received that on a Friday. I spoke with my board over the weekend, and on Monday I had a letter out to all of my community, my parents, my staff in the local newspaper that said this is OCR's opinion. It doesn't bear the weight of law, and we're not doing this in our county. You know, our children will use the facilities of their biological sex, and that's just one example of things that superintendents and school leaders have to deal with, of things that are coming down the pike. When you don't have leadership at the state level, what happened in Georgia and the situation now is we have districts all across the state who are approaching that differently.
Yeah.
We have one school district in Metro Atlanta who's currently being sued by parents of a 5-year-old girl who was sexually molested in her bathroom by a boy who claimed he was a girl, because their school district allows them to use whatever bathroom that they want to use. And so because there's been no real leadership on these really difficult situations, it likes to be brushed off as it's local control, and that's a local decision. Well, as state superintendent, you can provide guidance to those local school districts. You can provide a framework from which for them to operate within. So, so there are a lot of reasons. You showed a video in church, months ago that kind of points to the leftist agenda that it's really no longer creeping into our schools. It's there.
Wow.
It's not just dealing with transgender issues and the whole LGBTQ, but it's critical race theory, and it's obscene, offensive materials that are in our media centers. They're all issues that, my grandchildren are school age, yeah. and my daughter has enrolled them in private school right now, and she can afford to do that, but 90% of the parents in the state can't. Right. Who's going to stand up and protect those children?
John, I think that this is such a pivotal conversation that we are having. And here's what I would like for you to do. All of our friends, I want you to take just a moment and share this video. Go ahead and just click on it, hit share, and get this into as many people's hands as possible. Because what we're going to discuss over the next few moments, I believe, is going to be so enlightening to you, but also give you a clear understanding of the issues that we as parents are facing, but also that our children are encountering when they go to school. Now, you were the state school superintendent at one time, and and so when you got into office, that's really when Common Core, and this is an issue that I think we need to address right here, is this Common Core. Right. And then I want to get into the transgender, LGBTQ agenda, all of those type of things. So stay with us. But the Common Core has been a big deal, and I think your opponent has accused you or made the accusation, I should say, of that you're responsible for that being introduced in the state of Georgia. I need you to address that and perhaps clear up what went on and how Common Core came to the state of Georgia.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that, because it is a big misconception, and I think that my opponent has been a very key piece in that being perpetuated over the years. It's very important, I think, for the people of Georgia to understand the timeline of Common Core and how that came about. So there was, back in 2009, the state of Georgia moved forward with a grant application with the federal government called the Race to the Top grant. It was a $400 million grant that the state was pursuing, the state education department was pursuing, and they were denied that grant the first time out of the gate. One of the reasons, or one of the requirements within the Race to the Top grant, was the state had to have a set of what U.S. Department of Education considered college and career-ready standards. Mm-hmm. Georgia had just made a transition to the new Georgia Performance Standards. In fact, I was a curriculum director in a Metro Atlanta school district responsible for training our teachers in the new Georgia Performance Standards. We were not even finished rolling out those new standards when the state told us that we were going to be moving to these Common Core standards. So I didn't support that. We weren't even finished rolling out the new standards that we'd paid millions of dollars as a state to develop, to align our assessments to train teachers, and so I didn't support that. However, going back to the Race to the Top grant, the state made a second application in February of 2010 for that Race to the Top grant. In so doing, they and you could go back and look at the grant and see that they had said that they were going to adopt, the state of Georgia would adopt the Common Core performance standards, or the Common Core standards. And so that actually didn't happen until July. The state board adopted them in July. It's also important for the folks in Georgia to realize that the Common Core standards were developed by the National Republican Governors Association. The chair of the National Republican Governors Association, when those standards were developed, was Sonny Perdue, our governor. And so folks need to understand also that the governor appoints all 14 state board members in Georgia. That's how it works in Georgia.
Wow.
The state board is appointed by the governor. So our governor was the chair of the group that developed the standards, and then he appointed the board members. And so the balance of power at the state board and with the state superintendent is just like the local level. You've got a board that has to approve, but they can't approve without the superintendent's recommendation. The superintendent can't do anything without the board's approval. So I was kind of in a catch-22 in that our governor and my state board all supported the Common Core, and there was really nothing that I could do at that point. So moving forward in my tenure, and my opponent talks about supporting it, and I did this statewide faculty meeting. Well, these were standards that we had to use. The state board had said that we're using these standards. So, my job is to make the best of that.
Right.
But what I saw within the Race to the Top was other things that were critically important, and one of those being assessment. And so part of that was that the previous superintendent had said that we were going to be part of a national testing consortium that would develop our state test. Well, there is 100% truth to what gets tested gets taught. And so for me, the Common Core standards were an issue, but a much more critical issue was I didn't want a think tank in Washington, D.C. designing our state test, because that would control our curriculum.
Yeah.
And so I actually convinced the state board to allow us to pull out of those testing consortium, and we still developed our own test as a state. Still not the best, but it was one of those situations where I inherited this. To blame me for the Common Core would be the same thing to blame President Trump for Obamacare. I mean, he inherited that. I inherited the Common Core, and there wasn't really anything that I could do to change it.
So when people hear the advertisements or what have you about the Common Core, again, you're saying that's something that you inherited.
Yes, and quite frankly, while I was there, I actually was able to lead the state board in the process of declining to participate in national standards for science and social studies.
Wow.
So there were Common Core standards that were being developed in science and social studies, but we were not a part of that.
Well, that's interesting. Well, I'm glad that you cleared that up. One more time, for those of you that are just joining us, I'm here with John Barge, who's running for the state school superintendent in the state of Georgia. And this is so important. This conversation is so necessary for us to literally to have a dialogue about these wonderful issues that we're facing, and the citizens of the state of Georgia are going to be able to decide, do we want to continue the status quo, or we want to change? And John, for those of you, again, that's just joining us, is the husband of Lorraine Barge, and we love Miss Lorraine, who was healed dramatically and miraculously of stage 4 breast cancer here in the water. For more information on John Barge and his campaign, you can go to johnbargega.com, johnbarge, B-A-R-G-E, johnbargega.com. In the time that we have also, John, I want you to address the critical race theory, because that's the buzzword that seems to be in a hot topic that's going on around the country right now, that there are literally parents all over the nation of all ethnicities, all colors, are really upset about this critical race theory.
Should be.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, and what a great opportunity to talk about it right before Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Jr. said in his I Have a Dream speech, I want my children someday to be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And what critical race theory does is the exact opposite of what Martin Luther King's dream was. And that critical race theory teaches our children to judge each other by the color of their skin. It's the complete antithesis of what Martin Luther King really believed.
In what way? What's that? What does that look like coming from an educator to a classroom
Sure.
of very impressionable minds, and they're talking about the color of the skin and so forth? What does that look like?
Well, it comes in many, many different ways. It comes through teacher training programs. The incumbent right now is traveling the state saying that we don't have critical race theory. We do have critical race theory. It's in our schools. His own staff is training teachers in critical race theory. So it's happening in teacher training. So, for example, the 2019 and 2020 mathematics conference for the state, it wasn't necessarily focused on helping teachers learn instructional strategies to improve student achievement in mathematics. Their theme was accessing the keys to equity. And their keys that they learned about were critical consciousness and their own biases, their open-mindedness, critical responsiveness, culture. So they didn't have anything to do with math instruction. They had everything to do with having teachers identify where they have issues. And so it comes in teacher training. It comes in curriculum. So there are curriculums out there. One that comes to mind is Brain Pop that a lot of school districts use. It's an electronic curriculum. And there's a lesson in Brain Pop that really chastises students, white students, for about 10 minutes on their whiteness and making them feel guilty for being white. I'm not for teaching a scrubbed American history, but I'm also not for teaching things that are twisted and not true. And so, I think it's just as equally egregious that, I was in my early 50s before I ever heard anything about what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma and Black Wall Street. Mm-hmm. That's a travesty. We need to be teaching that in our schools. Yeah. But we don't need to be teaching people to hate each other because of the color of their skin. So it's coming through curriculum sources. It's coming through teacher training. We've got school administrators that are apologizing for their whiteness, and all that stuff is not helpful. It is teaching people to judge each other by the color of their skin.
So you think this is an element that's pretty dangerous that can have a very negative impact on society long term?
I do, because it just perpetuates that spirit of division. Martin Luther King also said, darkness can't drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Mm-hmm. Hate can't drive out hate. Mm-hmm. Only love can do that. And so what we're trying to do, Ibram Kendi's book, that he quotes in his book that the only solution to present racism is future racism. Or discrimination. Present discrimination is future discrimination. So it's continuing and perpetuating division and discrimination as a solution. Darkness can't drive out darkness.
Yeah. As a state school superintendent, how will you address this? How would you talk about it? What would be some policies that you would have in place, perhaps, that since it's already being taught in our schools, how would you fix that?
It's a great question. There are multiple ways that you can go about that. I know in speaking with some legislators, our legislative session just began this week. I think you'll see some legislation dropped this session that deals with critical race theory and banning critical race theory in our schools. It's the state board adopted a resolution last year dealing with critical race theory that they didn't support it, but that's not strong enough. And so working with legislators on the banning of CRT, I think, is important. Once they pass legislation, it's then incumbent upon the state board and the state superintendent to develop policies for local school districts to implement that. One of the first things that I will do also within the department is to create an office of transparency and accountability. That parents can come to if they are not getting responses from their local school district on concerns that they have, like be it with CRT in the classroom, or if it's a material in the media center, that they can come to the State Department and this Office of Transparency and Accountability, and we can help deal with those issues at the local level as well. So you can do it through policy, you can do it through legislation. We've got to give the parents back some of the control of their child's education.
Exactly.
What if parents object to curriculum? There's a reason for that. Let's not be secret about what we're teaching, and what better way to get parental support than to have their input on what you're teaching their children.
A great segue, because I want to come and I want to address the issue, and I want you to address the issue, I should say, on what's been happening with the LGBTQT, transgenderism, and really the ideology that's coming down the pike into our classrooms. Again, for those of you just joining us, I'm with John Barge, who is running for the state school superintendent in the state of Georgia. I just felt so compelled to bring him on and to be able to discuss some of these issues. We have to make sure, the body of Christ has to make sure that we have the right people in office, and whomever you're going to vote for, that's wonderful, that's great. I just wanted to give you, John, the platform to be able to share where you stand on certain issues. One, you're a part of our church family. Your wife was miraculously healed in our waters. I've known you for some time. I know your heart. I know where you stand on issues, and I know that you want to please the Lord. But not everybody that goes to the public school system is a Christian, a believer, and it doesn't mean that we're cramming down, and having church services in the school. But there has to be some type of level of a moral center, in the beginning, at the top, I should say. Sure. There's got to be a moral center. And you and I and parents, we've all watched with horror how this sexual invasion and the agenda of the LGBTQT has really found its footing in the public school system. I'm just mortified by what I hear and what I see, and just looking at the information, the books that are available in our public libraries or in our libraries at the school for kids to read, images to see. Let's talk a little bit about this. Let's talk about what's going on. How in the world have we been able to have the mindset that it's okay for a biological boy who identifies as a girl today to walk into a girl's bathroom or into their dressing room and to take a shower? I'm just really perplexed by that.
Yeah. So, very complex topic, and I appreciate you bringing it up. So, and I think it is important to recognize that not everybody that comes to our public schools is going to be a Christian. They're going to be all different faiths and different backgrounds, and some may have no faith at all. And we do have to operate within the law of separation of church and state. But my issue is not judging somebody for their lifestyle. My issue is our schools are not the platform to have the discussion. Mm-hmm. That's between children and their parents. Our schools are not the place we're not here to take the place of parents. We're not here to be a wedge between children and parents. I hear over and over and over, right here in our own church. I had a lady come up to me a few Sundays ago, and she was a nurse in a local school district, a school nurse in a public school. She is no longer because, in her words, she was told by the school counselor. School counselor brought a young man to her who was transitioning into a girl, and she was told by the counselor what this boy's new name would be, and we were to use female pronouns for her, him, and she was directed not to tell the parents. And I'm sorry, that is just not right. It's not an issue of being Christian or non-Christian. It's an issue of parents' rights, and we have to stop trampling on parents' rights as a public school system. That's where parents lose the trust. So again, it's recognizing that our schools are not the platform for this agenda. what is our core mission? If you look at what our platform is, it's to restore the foundation, because our foundation is we're to be a place of academics. We're to be teaching reading and math and science and social studies, and there's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no it's obvious why our current test scores are where they are. Our fourth graders are performing in reading and math at a 14-year low right now. And I think it's because we've moved so far away from teaching reading, writing, math, science, social studies, how to think, how to solve problems, to a social emotional learning, a curriculum, and a feel. How do you feel, rather than how to think critically? You know, we're busy telling kids what to think and not how to think. And so those are all issues there. But then getting to what's available for kids and the over sexualizing of our students, it's coming through books and in the media centers. And we have books in our media centers in elementary and middle schools and high schools that children can go and check out, that if you gave them or if I gave them to a student, we would be charged with a misdemeanor, because it's against the law in the state of Georgia to provide offensive materials to children or to minors. But there's an exception clause in the law that excludes libraries and specifically says school libraries. And so this material, while it's illegal for them to get it anywhere else in the state, even if they went to a teacher's classroom and a teacher had the book in her classroom library, that would be illegal. But it's legal for them to get it from a media center.
Okay, this is a real issue. I mean, there are books in a lot of our local school districts that are borderline, pornographic.
I would say not borderline.
It is.
It
exactly.
is, yeah.
All right. As the state school superintendent, how can you fix this? What can you do? Because this is what people want. I really feel that people want change from the top to the bottom, and they really want to know, okay, how can John Barge fix this issue? What can he put into place?
Well, I do know that last legislative session that there was legislation that was proposed to eliminate that loophole. It's these materials. It's not censorship. It's not book burning. It's these books would still be allowed in the public libraries, but they're not age appropriate for young minors in our media centers. And so there was legislation that was proposed last session to close that loophole and just to remove the school from the exception clause. But for whatever reason, that did not pass. The current superintendent was given an opportunity by parent groups who were supporting this legislation to support the legislation with our legislators, and he would not. They actually came to me, and I wrote letters of support as the former state superintendent, because, I mean, this really is grooming children to be part of a sex industry. It's desensitizing them. We have books that detail rape, that detail incest, that detail grandmothers molesting their grandsons. For Pete's sake, what is right about that? It's teaching children that this stuff is normal, that it's acceptable, that it's okay if it's not okay. And again, it's putting us between parents and their children. You know, you let parents talk with their children about those issues. And we have school counselors, and they can talk with students who have concerns, but to make it a school-wide, blanket issue is wrong.
I agree, John. What's going to happen in the school systems, the public education, if we continue down this path? You said we're behind. You said that from all the industrial nations, that are tracking education and in science and math, what's going to be, what is our nation going to look like in the next decade if something doesn't change?
Well, for me, that really frightens me, because not only do we have these issues, but having dealt with the pandemic for the last couple of years, some early data that is out there, there's some progress monitoring assessment software that millions of children across this country use. And some of the early data that's coming out this year of students basically reflecting the last year of learning during the pandemic when everybody was doing remote learning and whatnot. Nationwide, our kids are testing 2 years behind where they should be. So on top of all these other issues, we've got a real problem on our hands unless we specifically, consciously do something to refocus what is our core mission. Mm-hmm. We need to be teaching reading, writing, and math. So, I mean, if it's critical that kids read on grade level by third grade, which it is, the data is pretty clear that if you're not reading on grade level by third grade, you're a very strong statistic to drop out of school. If that is the case, why are we doing anything else K-3 other than teaching kids reading and basic numeracy? We've got to refocus what our core mission is about. So, but if we don't, you're going to see movements within the legislature for school choice, for vouchers, for parents to be able to choose where they send their children to school. Do I want the public education to be the school of choice? Sure I do, because that's where a majority of our kids are going to be. But if we don't really change our direction in public schools and public education, I'm afraid that it's going to look very different in 10 years.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're right. I really am. Again, I'm with John Barge, who's running for the state school superintendent in the state of Georgia. The reason I'm having this forum, this meeting, and this conversation is because I want you to get to know him. I am concerned about the mental, the physical, the spiritual, the emotional health of our society. I think the church needs to be re-engaging back into the political arena, not in the sense of where we're trying to manipulate policy through bad means, but having good people, godly people, Christian people in office, and that will live out their convictions and to help change things. Because the way we're going right now, John, is not in the right direction. So I want to encourage you to go to johnbargega.com. John Barge, BARGEGA.com, and support his campaign. If you would like to, make a donation. John, we've got about 2 minutes left. Why should the people at home vote for you?
Well, I can give you a lot of reasons, but I do have a 30-year career in education. I have a passion for doing the right thing for children. I have really a history of being able to stand up and make those difficult decisions for kids. If you go back and look at my time in office as state superintendent, in 2012, Georgia was the only state in the nation that saw gains in student achievement on every single national test that's administered consistently across the country. The only state that saw gains in every assessment. So we ranked 12th in the nation in advanced placement test scores. Our African American students ranked second in the nation in passing AP exams and earning college credit while they were still in school. I have a real passion for career and technical education, and understanding that not all kids are going to go to a 4-year college. They don't need to. They don't want to. Mm-hmm. But what are we doing to make sure that they're successful? So my first time in office, I created the career pathway system that a lot of state districts, it's actually in state law. I worked with the legislature to do that. So I'm passionate about making sure kids get a strong education and that parents retain their rights with their children when it comes to their education. So lots of reasons, but 2 minutes is not a whole lot of time.
Well, I think we've heard. I think we've heard your heart. I think we've heard your agenda. And I'm just so thankful for John Barge to be with us today. And again, go to johnbargega.com. And if you want to help support his campaign, you can make a donation now. I know that's one of the big things that you need.
It is. Campaigns are very, very expensive, and contributions would be very helpful.
Well, we want to do what we can, and this is an opportunity for us as people that are watching this to show our support to John Barge for what he's doing and the change that he wants to implement in the state of Georgia. And I know some of you may be out of the state of Georgia and you still want to be a part of this and be a part of the campaign. You can make a donation to his campaign, and I know he'll appreciate that. And I'm just so thrilled that you came by and allowed us to do this. Again, this is Christ Fellowship Church in Dawsonville, home of the North Georgia Revival, where we believe that the greatest days of our nation are not behind us. I really feel that they're upon us and literally right in front of us, but we need to take back certain elements of our society that we have literally allowed to be taken from us. So again, johnbarge.ga.com. If you want to be a support, just send him an email, let him know that you're with him and encouraging him. So thank you for being a part of this. Please share this video. This has the opportunity to reach thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, not only in the state of Georgia, but around the world. So if you'll take just a brief moment to share this video, and we thank you for being a part of our discussion today. John, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, guys, God bless you.